Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are. With Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is... yes.
I've done what I needed to do. Thank you.
For what?
For helping me find my sister.
She seemed really fond of that one Jedi Master. What was his name again? Soul?
After running through that forest for an extremely long time, I realized something. I don't need to do this anymore. I don't need to kill a Jedi without a weapon. I don't need to keep this deal. What?
Watch out! Run!
This is James Arnold Taylor, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi. I have a good feeling about this.
Hello, friends. It is time once again to talk about the next episode of Star Wars The Acolyte. This is the 4th episode in Season 1. The title of the episode is Day. And I've got 2 spectacular guests who are joining me to talk all about The Acolyte. First, he joined me for episodes 1, 2, and 3. So why not keep my lucky streak going, bring in the wonderful James Burns from Jedi News. James, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, Dan. Thanks for having me, and welcome to all your wonderful listeners.
Well, thank you so much. I always appreciate your coverage on Jedi News and all your information on the site. It is my absolute number one go-to, as I've told you many times, both on and off the air.
Thank you. It's greatly, greatly appreciated. Come to Jedi News for all your Star Wars news 24/7, 365 days of the year at JediNews.com. Bing,
bing. Exactly. Also joining us, this is his first time on Coffee with Kenobi. He is a longtime friend of the show. I had the good fortune to meet him at Star Wars Celebration a few years ago. The marvelous Daz Davies. Daz, welcome to Coffee with Kenobi.
Oh, thanks, Dan. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. Excited to talk Acolyte with you.
I still remember meeting you at the podcast meetup at the Anaheim Hilton a few years ago. So it's great to see you. Great to see you and your family doing so well online too.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's good memories that I remember it well.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about The Acolyte. The 4th episode is titled Day. And yes, this episode is coming out a little bit later, but I was on vacation last week with my wife. And so we are now going to talk all about Day. James, you know the drill by now. Just give me one word to describe this episode and overall reactions to it.
Wow, one word. Come back to me. Go to Daz first. Go to Daz first.
Okay. I'm going to go to Daz first. Daz, what's one word to describe the episode and overall reactions to it?
My one word I've gone with is deception. This show has given me trust issues. I don't believe anybody. And particularly in this episode, it had me second guessing people's true intentions, what their real motivations are. So I've gone with deception. My overall feeling with this episode, as with them all, really good. I'm enjoying it a lot. It's not without a few things that aren't hitting home for me, but overall I had a really good time with it again.
Glad to hear it. And deception's a really good word. All right, James, you want me to go first or you want to go?
No, I'm ready.
Okay, let's do it.
So the word I'm going to choose is a word that Daphne Keane has been using quite a lot on the red carpet, and that's changes. And I'm not talking about David Bowie's changes, but changes. There were lots of character changes all the way through this episode. Characters kept changing their mind on the direction they were going, and that played through the whole episode right till the climactic end. And I really enjoyed the episode. I did think at one moment that we were watching Lord of the Rings, and we had the Fellowship of the Rings, the Fellowship walking along atop the hill there, the 10 of them walking along, and I was just waiting for Howard Shore music to kick in. Oh. And that's not a dig at Michael Abels, because Michael Abels has done an amazing job with the score, but it just gave me sort of glimpses back to that.
I like
not
that.
A bad thing.
No, are you kidding? That's about as high a price as you can get. Absolutely. My word for this episode Day would be paradoxical. A paradox, in case anyone is not aware, is for two things happening at the exact same time that seem to be opposites, but are also equally true at the same time. There are parts of this episode that I am riveted by, and especially the ending, which undoubtedly we will talk about. But then there are other parts of it that leave me feeling a bit bereft of understanding what's going on. So we're going to talk about that quite a bit. Daz, let's start with you. Give me something from the episode. It could be anything from the beginning, middle, end. Doesn't matter. Nothing too big, nothing too small. What would you like to talk about that kind of stood out to you about the episode?
Probably the thing that stuck out to me most in this episode, I'd say, is the fact that we got to see a lot more of Chimere. He's such an interesting character, and been looking forward to finding out a bit more about him. His exchanges with May were so interesting. It's really hard to sort of tie him down into who he is and what he's doing. At times he's like almost like a bungling fool, like a bit of a clown. He's tripping over and sort of stumbling over his words. But then he changes tone quite quickly, depending on. It seems to me what May is thinking. You know, he was at one point, asking her about how are you going to go about killing the Jedi without a weapon. And then when she wasn't really committing to an answer and was saying that she's already succeeding, he suddenly changed his tone, and he was kind of like, "You must do this. The master demands this." And then May presses him on it soon after, and he didn't like that. I thought he was sort of stuttering on some of his words. She began asking him about his relationship with the master, and he was okay asking, but he was not so happy with being asked. And I think that we need to watch that guy. He's very suspicious.
Okay, I'm glad you brought him up. I've certainly got some things to say about him, but James, do you want to add to anything Daz said there?
He is very suspicious, and I think we all might have our suspicions that maybe he's hiding another personality. He gets very, very defensive at times, and I had to wonder at the start of the episode, what was he doing there? Because he wasn't really aiding May's journey too much, and at one point seemed to be holding her up. So yes, he had the information of where she needed to go, perhaps, but he seemed more of a hindrance than a help, and got very, very defensive very, very quickly when May wasn't necessarily listening to him. And on a second, third viewing, I started to feel more and more that maybe he is the man behind the mask. But I'm sure we'll find out more in episode 5, or will be, because episode 5 could be another flashback episode, because there's still part of the story that's missing from when May and Osha are parted. So it's going to be very interesting to see what episode 5 brings us.
So I like that, and I agree. I think I can say this without speculating. It seems like there's two things going on. Either they want us to think that this character is actually the big bad, to coin a Buffy the Vampire Slayer phrase, that is behind everything, all of the deception, all of the manipulation of Osha. If that is the case, I think it's equivalent to Babe Ruth walking up to home plate and pointing at left field and then actually hitting a home run. Like, this is being telegraphed. I hope that's not the case, because it seems it's just too clear and too obvious, I think.
It's Phantom Menace vibes at that point.
Right, which means we already know, because Phantom Menace we already knew, because we had Star Wars Empire and Jedi. So if that is what he is, I hope that's not it, because I really want him to be a little more complicated. Because why is he's clearly scared of this master, when at the end we can see why he would be scared of Darth Teeth, or whatever his sort of surname is online. But you wonder, why is there a sense of loyalty? Is it purely fear-based? Is he really in it to try to help Osha? I'm more concerned with the random change where Osha's like, oh, you know what? Even though I've shown no signs of doubt, really, I saw my sister, and that's good enough for me. I don't have to do this anymore. But the problem with that for me, and I don't mean to hijack what you're saying, Des, is that if she has suddenly changed her mind, that's great. But she just murdered a couple of people in cold blood, murdered them. And so bad that she asked someone to commit suicide. That's like almost like a serial killer kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So there's no remorse there. If she's like, oh, I'm not to kill him, but I'm just going to hang out with my sister. That's all I need. Well, yeah, that part's true. But if she is really that, I don't know. I need more. You know what I mean? I need more to believe that. Because I don't think that's why it's paradoxical. She maybe wants to change and just be with her sister, but the last time she saw her sister, she tried to kill her too. So can you turn away from this mission and can just completely ignore that you murdered these people? And if so, then my sociopath theory still holds true. Again, I'm not sure if this is part of the story or it's just not connecting dots the way I hoped that it would.
And why even make the trip to Kofar if that's what you're thinking?
Yes. Yeah, give us a sign. Show us a moment where she's sitting looking out the window and in space, or drawing a picture of her sister, or looking at a hollow or something. I don't know what you would do. I mean, it's just missing a little bit.
Yeah.
So.
I was wondering when she was talking to Chimera whether she was suspicious of him, but I got the impression that wasn't the case. It's more that she just overall wanted out. It wasn't an issue of him. She wanted to sort of, give him the slip, go see Kelnocker and turn herself in. She had it all mapped out. It did sound sort of like a fantasy kind of idea that she had in her head of how it would play out, because looking at what she was suggesting she could do, no matter what information she can provide them with, I would expect her to know the Jedi well enough to know that they're not just going to write off her sins and well, thanks for the information, off you go. It seems like fantasy world to me.
Right. Although I totally agree. But then she says, hey, I'm going to turn myself into Master Kelnaka. So I guess if that's the case where she's owning her responsibility, that's great. But still, like you just said, Daz, and like you had mentioned, James, I don't see any remorse, like zero remorse. And I just feel like you can't turn yourself in and want to be with your sister who's clearly good and not feel any remorse for killing people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but then why not take Kimar with her? Because he's committed atrocities and he's been complicit in what she's done. So if she's going to hand herself in, then surely she should be taking him and handing him in too.
She clearly doesn't care. She leaves him up to dry, which is a convenient sort of Clark Kent Superman thing, isn't it? Maybe. Yeah. Maybe. All right, James, what about you? What's something that stands out for you in the episode?
I have to say, I really enjoyed seeing Basil. I liked the character. I thought it was a very, very fun character. And I'm so happy that they chose to bring that character to life using a real person rather than CGI or effects. And the character actor did an absolutely fantastic job. He's the same person that also played R2-D2 in The Rise of Skywalker. So really, really good to see him bring that character to life. And there were some nice sort of light-hearted moments in the beginning of the track where, he's sniffing the stuff and it just brought a bit of brevity to what was obviously a very, very important mission, because they need to find Kelnaka, because obviously they fear he's going to be killed and they need to get to him before May does or before somebody else does. So I enjoyed that. And we've had tracking devices before in Star Wars, but nothing like this necessarily. And it makes a change that they've brought in something that we know that dogs do incredibly well here in our real lives, as it were. So to see them bring something in that rather than, I don't know, a homing beacon or a pull-out device that's going to show them the way to Kelnaka, that they've done this instead. And I actually like that. I found that quite refreshing. And obviously we can see some synergy between what we see in our own lives. And it's quite nice to see that sometimes, albeit in a slightly different way.
And it's also interesting that they mentioned that language that
yes.
What's the creature's name again?
Basil.
What a British name. That I liked that character fine. I like that there's a new language.
Yes.
And I think that part is pretty fun. I didn't really land for me either way, but I like that this series is doing practical effects and building sets. I don't believe they're using the volume at all.
No. I think there was a couple of shots potentially. Sorry, I should have said that the actor's name is Hassan Taj.
Yes.
Who actually plays Basil. I don't think they did a lot of volume, so there isn't a dedicated volume here in the UK anymore. There was at Pinewood for a short time, and then they dismantled it and moved it to another studios. So everything that they showed at Shepperton and Pinewood at the moment is all done pretty much using practical effects and actually building real sets, which is incredible. I actually got to see some of the Acolyte sets on the Shepperton sound stages whilst they were taking a break in shooting, I guess. The other point I just wanted to mention, why are 8 Jedi required to go to find Kalnaka?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, to me, it's because they realize the gravity of the situation. Although it's not really fully fleshed out. It does, even like in the Clone Wars, which seems to be much more detrimental to the galaxy. You'd maybe send 2. Now Obi-Wan and Anakin are probably way more powerful than all these Jedi, maybe, but I mean that's really kind of subjective, and we don't have enough information. I don't know. What do you think, Daz?
Well, the cynic in me thinks that not all of the Jedi are going to walk away from the battle. That looks like it's going to be at the start of possibly the next episode. I don't think that they want any of the main characters taken out of play at this point. So the cynic in me thinks that they're there to make up the numbers, and possibly the numbers will be going down. I did like the way that the Jedi were so matter of fact about Basil, and Osha was a bit more like us. And at one point she says, "The Basil, like it's not a person," and I can't remember if it was it might have been Jackie. He goes, "His name is Basil," and she just couldn't get her head around the fact that this is a person. I don't know whether they're friends, but the Jedi see him very much as just an equal. He's just with him being such an unusual species. I think she was finding it hard to connect with him.
Yes. Right. Yeah, there's some weird connections or lack of connections, which brings me to my first point, which is we've been through 4 episodes, so we're halfway through the season. Right now I'll focus on the things that continually work well for me, and it is the music, the strings, the ambiance, the atmosphere that Star Wars is always so good at. Is continually great. It really adds, I dare say it adds more to the emotion of each individual episode than the actual characters do. Besides Master Soul, who continues to be just an absolute marvel. His empathy and strength continues to be an honest showcase. But at the end when he says, help me bring May in, and I will, once you both get on the ship, I'll tell you everything. So this is where I just want to throw up a flag and say, I don't, even though I said this is something positive, it is still positive. I just want to clarify something. This keeps getting referred to as a mystery. I don't think it's a mystery. A mystery is when you've got clues and pieces and you can put them together. Omitting information or not having information doesn't make it mysterious. It just means it's not there.
There is a slight mystery here, though, because we know that Turbin has scars on his face, and all of the practically, I'll say 99% of the footage that we've seen doesn't show him with those scars, apart from when he's killed. But we don't. Sorry, the point I'm trying to make is we don't see him get the scars. We know he didn't have the scars going into this. We know the scars were as a result of the events that happened. But we don't know what those events are. So something else big went down between May and Osha and the Jedi and the rest of the Covenant. You and I spoke, Dan, early on after we'd seen, I think, episode 3, and we said, if it was a fire, why weren't those bodies burnt? And they weren't burnt at all. They were perfect in terms of their clothes. They weren't ruined in any way, which wouldn't be if they'd been in a situation or been in a fire. They would be burnt a little bit and they would be dirty, and that's not the case. So I'm convinced something else has gone down, and we don't know what that is yet. So to me, that's the mystery. How did Torben get those scars, and what else really happened on that planet? Because when we see the events again, even in the start of this episode, when they do the flashbacks, we still don't see that huge peril in the way that would get these 4 people so scared and not to report back to the Jedi Council exactly what had happened.
That works for me. That works for me. I would say it's more mysterious than a mystery, but I think I'm thinking of mystery as like a noun of like like something that has to be solved. Not learning all the information yet is mysterious, but it's not a mystery. Does that make sense? Yeah. And I might just be, it might just be rhetoric. Daz, what's your next one?
I think that I'll go to the Jedi making some suspect choices in particularly with the conversations towards the beginning of the episode with Vernestra, where there's a lot of politics being bandied about by Jedi, which is never a good thing. It feels very prequel-y, I feel, really, rather than sort of some of the High Republic stories that I've read. It's concerning that this control of information is never a good thing. And Sol, I think, says that it will have to be raised, I think, with the High Council, and she shuts it down. It's not the way that she wants this to go down. She's all about the optics of the situation, which is strange because I get the impression that Vernestra is pretty much completely in dark about what the situation is. And in some ways that's even more concerning because she doesn't even know what really is going on here. It seems that perhaps a Jedi is trained May, and that would be a problem, but it's completely unconfirmed really at this point. And it perhaps shows the pathway that the Jedi are going to take between this point and the prequels. I was a little bit worried about the decisions, and it was good to see our old friend Mr. Mundy there as well. It was interesting to see their thought process at this point in time.
James, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd like to know how they chose the Jedi that we saw on screen and why they rewrote a little bit of canonical information in terms of Ki-Adi-Mundi's birth date, I guess. I don't know how that furthers the story. Maybe there's something that we haven't seen yet, or maybe there's something coming where that will fit into place. But I don't necessarily agree in just doing those things for the sake of doing those things. I hope there's a good reason for it.
Agreed.
I'm sure it's deliberate. I thought that it was quite a bold choice, and so trusting in the story group, they won't have missed that detail going through of who that person is.
Hope so.
And
it's not him? Is it possible?
No, it is. It is in the credits. It says it's him.
So what is the birthday thing that I'm missing? My knowledge of Ki-Adi-Mundi's oeuvre is quite limited.
Yeah, so they've changed the canonical birth date because I think he was supposed to be older at this point and he appears younger than he is in terms of when we see him later on. So there's been a lot of, well, there's always issues online, but there's been a little bit of backwards and forwards on that.
Huh. That's something I would have even caught. I can certainly understand why that could be problematic, but I don't know, like you said, Daz, with the story group, there's got to be a reason, as you mentioned, James, that maybe we will find out about soon.
Yeah, and as long as there is, then listen, it's very difficult when you're writing Star Wars and there is so many books and so many other bits and pieces going on. And I know in an ideal world, we'd want everything to perfectly match together. Mm-hmm. But it's impossible with so many different authors and so many people being involved in this project. Sometimes slight details have to change so that they can tell a better or bigger story. So I get that and I accept that. So everybody else just needs to get behind it too.
Okay, let's do that. James, what's your next one?
I think my next one, I really enjoyed the scenes with Daphne Keaton with Jackie when she's learning those saber moves, and they're learning how to block. They're not learning how to fight with a saber. They're learning how to block and how to defend themselves. And that's very telling, because obviously we're at a time when the galaxy's been at relative peace at this point, and there isn't a big threat, and there are no Sith running around that we know of. And they're teaching the Jedi Padawans how to defend themselves, how to look after themselves. So I just enjoyed seeing that. I love seeing bits of the Jedi training. We don't see enough of that. And it's great to see. Normally when we see it, we see much, much younger Padawans being taught. So to see a slightly older group of Jedi learning these skills and continually learning these skills and learning new ways of doing things, I really enjoyed seeing that.
I like that too. I thought that was cool. I'm wondering who this person was. To seem much more a bit like a drill instructor than an altruistic Jedi master. But they're not always going to be altruistic. Sometimes they are a little bit more harsh, and we've seen that plenty of times in Star Wars stories and storytelling. Jackie is interesting. Her relationship with Osha is one that I'm really interested in. But I'm also it's clear that we're supposed to be interested in their friendship, their evolving friendship. And they kind of bring out like more of a vulnerability within one another. There is a section at the end when Jackie is giving Osha some advice, and she says, "We're not defined by what we lose. We're defined by what we survive." And that was one of the few times where I've heard Jackie talk where I thought, what? So we're defined by surviving trauma? That's such a pessimistic way to look at the world, and you're a Jedi. Did any of you have a problem with that?
Yes, very much so. It didn't work. It didn't work at all. And it's not what you expected to hear her say.
No, because... Go ahead, Daz.
I wrote it down because I couldn't get my head around exactly what she was trying to say. Like you say, I'm not sure how that's a positive outlook. And the situation seemed to be calling for a little bit of wisdom to help. And I was thinking she seemed just to be really defining her by her trauma. And I thought, I couldn't understand it at all.
I could have seen something different, like, be strong. You are more than the sum of your parts. There's just so much more to you than this moment. This does not define you. It is but a grain in the sand of your life. Something similar to that. Not, well, you're just going to have to survive. I mean, it's like, reminds me of whenever, it's not really related, but whenever I say to someone, "Hey, how you doing?" And they say, "Living the dream," and they don't actually mean they're living that dream. They really are pessimistic. Come on, just find a different way to look at life differently. Maybe that's easy for me to say. I don't know. I don't know, but I found that piece of advice strange and paradoxical. I don't mean to keep throwing a boomerang every time either of you throw out a point. It just keeps connecting me to other ideas. Because again, as I said before, I really want to like every single beat of every single story. But I also don't, because I feel like that's just not authentic. I mean, there are even things in some of Shakespeare's plays I'm like, well, why? What's going on there? That doesn't work for me. Doesn't have to. Again, there are people far smarter than me that are creating these things. But I think... Go ahead.
I was gonna say, but that's the whole thing with these shows. We all see slightly different things.
Yeah.
And we're all commenting them on in a constructive way. And it's really interesting. I love the fact that we can always talk like this and come up with different things that we can pull apart and find and teach each other things from what we're seeing on screen. Learn from one another.
I completely agree with that. The challenge is always, I mean, she's a Padawan, right? Jackie's a Padawan. Yeah. So it makes sense. She's not going to be ironed out fully with her philosophy of life, but that seemed, I don't know that was a character thing. That seemed like a weird step in the writing to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it took me out of it. I had to stop and think. Well, hold on a minute.
Yeah. So then, what about whenever OSHA? No, sorry. Whenever OSHA is talking to oh gosh, I can't even think of his name, Mr. Hunky.
Yord.
Yeah, Yord. What about their conversation?
Well, I'm intrigued by their relationship. There's obviously a lot that's gone on between the two of them, and I'm hoping, whether it be in a novel or comics or whatever, that we get to learn more about their relationship and what went on in the not so distant past, because we've got 10 years of catching up to do. But they obviously had a really strong bond at some point, and then she left and he carried on getting accolades and running up through the ranks of Jedi Knight, etc. So I'm really interested to see what that relationship and what that bond is.
Because at one point he says to her, Yord says, give me your blaster. That's a Jedi. That's a property of a Jedi. And then it's kind of dropped. I didn't necessarily have a problem with that because I feel like they just got distracted by other things. Because there is tension, but then there isn't. So they're fostering something that is worth at least looking to see where it happens, because something needs to happen for Yord to be smoothed out to where he's a character that you want to root for. And I hopefully this is one of those gateways to that. Daz, anything you want to say about Yord and OSHA's conversation?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. It was he was quite quiet this episode compared to how he's been previously. He was less outspoken. It did make me laugh when he was giving the briefing in the ship, and OSHA's reaction of for like a very complete talk. And yeah, I think that covers it.
Well done. Is there anything? I mean, I feel like we've covered a lot of key things. I do want to bring up the ending, because I feel like for all of the sort of the ups and downs in the sort of the inconsistent pacing and in the breadcrumbs that do not exist to follow some of these narrative threads, what we do have is a spectacular ending, where the master shows up, levitating creepily from the surface. You mentioned Lord of the Rings, but you mentioned where the protagonist. This reminded me sort of the ring race, that there's sort of that appear and they're very, very deadly, or almost something from like a really dark version of Wizard of Oz, where this thing hovers from the ground and lowers itself, comes up to OSHA in a chilling scene. Even though when I know what's happening, it's a really chilling scene. Ignites his red lightsaber blade, or maybe it's her lightsaber blade. I don't know kind of character this is. And all the Jedi ignite their lightsabers and they run, and they're force pushed away, which is the second time we've seen the force push to use sand to kind of cover what people are seeing. And that was great. Like that is an earned cliffhanger. Like that's a true cliffhanger where you're excited to see what's going to happen. Really, really like that a lot.
Yeah, the music at that point as well was incredible. I noticed that they used a bit something of a trope music sound, I suppose, for the horror genre, where you've got this sort of sliding, sort of scratching down the string, but boy, did it work. The darkness at that point, it was at the point that May noticed that said he's here. The light in the background just completely died away. It wasn't gradual. It was as though darkness descended, and he's darkness personified, really, coming down behind OSHA. It scared me when he ignited the lightsaber. I had this instant reaction, very similar to Kylo Ren and Han Solo.
Yes,
where they were so close that they're in such close quarters that when he when he ignited the lightsaber, there was a moment where I just waited to see, is OSHA okay? And sort of that red beam in that darkness was just stunning,
chilling.
It reminded me a little bit of a couple of scenes from The Dark Knight, or the Dark Knight trilogy, where Batman is sort of hovering and then lowers himself and makes his presence known, and then obviously takes out the bad guys or whatever he needs to do. So, I mean, I was just mesmerized by that. And when it finished, bearing in mind, Dan and I saw these episodes 4 or 5 weeks ago, and we'd only been given episodes 1 to 4.
Yeah.
And episode 4 finished, and I'm like, no, you cannot do that to us. Because it was a great place to stop. And it's interesting that they haven't given us episode 5 to watch yet. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that picks things up. But I loved it. At that moment, I was hooked, and I wanted more immediately. I think most people would have felt the same.
It was really exciting. Daz, we probably have time for one more to bring up before we give our letter grades. What's one more topic of conversation you'd like to discuss?
I think I'd say that I was disappointed we didn't get to see more of Kelnaka. I found that with all of the Jedi who have been victims in the series. I would have loved to have seen more of them. I know that we're seeing some of them in the flashbacks, but going into the series, particularly really Kelnaka, a Wookiee Jedi, we've read about them, we've seen some in animation, but to have seen it a little bit more of what that looks like in live action would have been really nice. And I'd also say that the impact of their deaths has felt more like just sort of something to sort of build a story around, rather than having an emotional impact on me. I would expect to be far sadder about these characters dying. Obviously, they're Jedi, and we'll feel like when they're killed, it's a bad thing, it's terrible, but we don't have that sort of emotional hit that it would have been nice to have had if we spent more time with them first.
Imagine watching Infinity War Endgame and Iron Man or Captain America or whoever dies or goes away or whatever, right? And there's no stories before that show us anything about these characters, and we've never heard them. Kelnaka's death was on my list for the last thing I wanted to talk about. With him and the Carrie-Anne Moss character, there or any of the Jedi who have died, this would have had so much more weight for me if I cared. I mean, I guess you could say the same thing about Order 66. Most of the Jedi who die, we don't know who they are when we first see Revenge of the Sith in the theater in 2005. We have no clue. I mean, you might have seen them in passing in a little bit in episode 2, maybe. But even that is just like they're a little more than pedestrians or just side characters. And so that I feel like that's an opportunity I would have liked to have seen more of him. Am I more compelled to buy an action figure if I know who the characters are and I care about them? Yeah, unless I'm a completist and I want to get everything. So I think we probably know how Steve Sansweet feels about that. But I don't... that bothered me because we don't even get to see a fight. Like you said, Daz, a Wookiee Jedi live action? Are you kidding? We could have seen so much, but he's sitting in a chair. Looks like he just kind of got sucker punched, for lack of a better word, with the wound. So none of these deaths, none of the emotion here is earned, and that's my continual struggle with the Acolyte so far. Even with Osha and May, because of the lack of presence that it is happening for me. I'm having a hard time with emotional buy-in for anybody except for Soul. And again, I take no pleasure in feeling this way. I'm just, again, intellectually honest, critical thinker. That's where I'm always coming from this perspective. I want more. I think there's more that can happen. Don't take any joy in feeling this way, but I'm being honest.
I think we're going to see some more. I think there's more to play out in terms of what happened with the fire, and I think we will see those Jedi wielding lightsabers at that point. And I'm hoping that Jonas got more to do than just what we've seen so far, because I would be bitterly disappointed with the first Wookiee Jedi coming to screen just doing what we've seen. So,
and if that's true, I mean, to cut you off, but if that's true, the deaths still don't mean anything, because when leading up to that, there's no emotional baggage. So it's something like, oh, you're going to feel bad about this, but only when you watch it a second or third time after you've seen the whole series. Yeah. That's a problem to me.
Yeah. I mean, part of me says that maybe it would have been better to have played out episode 3 first as episode 1, and then go into episode 2 as when we first see May walking through the village, because then at least we'd sort of understand what was going on. And then at that point, we wouldn't know whether it was May or Osha going in to take out the Jedi. And we'd sort of understand why, but it would build a lot more intrigue at that point.
Yes, and empathy.
And as you say, absolutely, Dad, we'd have a lot more empathy for the characters, for all the characters, not just May and Osha, but some of the Jedi too. So it will be interesting at the end of this that if we just rearrange some of these episodes, does it tell the same story, but in a better way, perhaps?
I hope that we get to see more. And I completely, as always, reserve the right to change my mind as we proceed. All right, James, anything you wanted to talk about as we begin to wrap up?
No, I think we've covered pretty much everything. I just want to see what's next.
Me too.
We're all at that point, and it's far away as we record this. So I'm looking forward to see what's next. Just huge shout out to some of the effects in this episode, because I thought it was done incredibly well. The lighting, the way that the music comes in, the cues, the work from Skywalker Sound. I think somebody mentioned it before. The music in here has been absolutely amazing, and I'm delighted that episodes 1 to 4, the music from that is now available for everyone to download free of charge to listen to on their favorite streaming platform. So, and it's incredible. The music is absolutely great.
I agree. I think it's masterful stuff. Well, Daz, you are our number one guest host with the most. Why don't you start for as we close out this conversation? Give me your letter grade for the episode, and just any last minute thoughts you'd like to share.
So the letter grade I've gone with is a B, a solid B. But the some of the issues we've spoken about are the reason I haven't given it an A. I would love to. I think it had an A-star finish. I think it was a proper A+ ending. And I do wonder, once coupled with the next episode, whether seen as a whole, I'd give the pair of episodes the higher grade. I just think that we've got to a certain point in this where I think things are really going to accelerate from here. I've no doubt that the story beats that we saw this time will have a payoff soon. So it's going to be a B for me.
Okay. Excellent. James, what about you?
So I'm going to give it a B-. There were a few little flaws here that sort of took me out of things, especially the line that Jackie said towards the end of the episode. But the ending sort of saved it. Those last couple of minutes, that climactic build-up at the end was incredible. And Leslie Headland did a fab job at bringing all of that together and keeping us on the edge of our seats. And when that happened, yeah, I mean, I was left at that point in the show. I was completely hooked and wanting to know more. So bring it on.
Love it. Mine is also a B-. I think if I would have reviewed this the first time, I would have given it an A-. But this is one of the few episodes, and I think Ross Halibin had mentioned this when he was on the Real Base Card podcast. I liked it less the second time I watched it. Yeah. I rarely say that, but I noticed more things that story beat wise didn't quite connect as I'd hoped they would. I agree with you both that the ending is an A++, spectacular. I think there can be more. I want there to be more. I am not as optimistic as you, James, that this will get better. I haven't seen a lot of evidence to show me that it will. I hope, believe me, I hope that I am wrong. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't, I'm completely at peace with that too. As I said on Coffee with Kenobi earlier, actually, I think I said it on CWK Pour-Over, which of course members of the CWK Alliance are able to listen to. If Star Wars ended in 1977 after New Hope, I'd be fine with that because I would still be basking in that film. I still am. I think we all are. So anything that happened after A New Hope for me is complete gravy and complete bonus.
It's still my favorite film. Yep.
Yeah, me too. And I like the magic of that. And maybe it's not fair, but that's kind of, I think, what I've realized in my time as a Star Wars fan. That I think I sort of inadvertently compare everything to A New Hope. Purely the dynamics of the characters. So Obi-Wan, Luke, Han, Leia, Chewbacca, 3PO, R2, all the characters, Darth Vader, whatever, the characters in A New Hope. Even with small beats and only in a little over 2-hour film, the emotion is earned because of the conversations and the relationships and the situations they find themselves in where there aren't dots missing and I don't have to connect things that don't exist.
Yeah, I buy that. Yeah.
Totally.
Look, for me, the minute that Starfighter flew overhead, I was on board, and I was, it was just captivating in more ways than one.
Right.
But it just did. It was completely spellbinding, and there aren't many films that you can say in the first few opening beats that you're that taken aboard and you're that invested. It doesn't happen very often. It really, really doesn't. And for me, Star Wars is one of the few films that's done that.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are. With Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
Well, James, as always, thank you so much for sharing your time and talents with us. Please let us know where we can find more of your excellent coverage and tell us more about Jedi News. As if they don't already know. Of course they know.
I hope they know, but you can find Jedi News everywhere on social media. Just search for Jedi News Network and come to Jedi News for your Star Wars news 365 days of the year at JediNews.com. If you want to talk to me personally, reach out to me at Planet Burns on social media and I'll get back to you. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, my friend. And Daz, fabulous work. I knew you would hit it out of the park for your first time on Coffee with Kenobi. This will certainly not be the only time you're on Coffee with Kenobi. Happy to have you on to share a cup of coffee, and appreciate you, your friendship, your insights, and for being a positive force for good in the Star Wars universe.
Thank you very much, Dan. That's very kind. If anybody wants to get in touch with me, I'm on most of the social medias as at Daz Davies 1. That's at Daz Davies and the number 1 afterwards. That's on the Instagram threads, and as our friend David Modlers likes to call it, Twitter X. So always happy to hear from people. Just give me a shout if you fancy a chat.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.